Great. So before we begin, I've created a poem, which is something that I do on each of my podcast episodes or before major events. So I've got one that should encapsulate our session and set it off in a lyrical fashion. In a world full of media, music and advertising, we're here to explore how we drive real inclusion and not something that's subsidizing. To build pathways to integrate diversity and not just token gestures. To see equity on all levels, providing more chance for open ventures. For many past and many still, the challenges lie in visibility. Gatekeepers and unconscious bias, the key blockers of expressive ability. And now, as we tackle DE and I in the creative industry, let's see what paths we can shape to change the narrative and shape history. So, Begum, please introduce yourselves and what you do.
That was mad. I've done quite a few panel discussions, but it's the first time we've had a poem at the start. So wicked. My name's Lyle Bignon. We're here for the panel before lunch. Just talked a little bit about my work, but just in brief, I'm a music consultant. Been working in the industry for about 20 years. I've dabbled in artist management. I've worked predominantly getting artists, venues, festivals, bands, producers, MCs on TV, on radio, media coverage. I'm now in a place where I work with future talent and the next generation a lot more. I also do a lot more booking and curation and programming. And in the other part of my professional life, on Nighttime Economy, ambassador for Birmingham, working on behalf of the Nighttime Industries Association.
I'm Foreda. I work in the advertising industry in Omnicom Media Group. I specialize in diversity-driven kind of work and campaigns. I work in OMG Nike, so I work across all types of brands, really help them come from unconscious exclusion to conscious inclusion. That's part of the tongue tie. Yeah.
Cool. Hi, my name is Wizdom. I am the co-director of a music education charity called Sound Connections. Within that, we run, one of the programs that we run is the MOBO Unsung, which is the artist development program for MOBO Awards. Previously, I worked at Talyard in London and run their community engagement program, work experience program, which is called Talyard Impact. I'm a clock sector expert, which I have to say because Denise is here. I also an artist manager and was a youth worker before and sort of seen the process that it takes for a lot of young people, especially those from diverse backgrounds and economically challenged backgrounds, to actually develop into success within the industry.
Thank you all and welcome. So my first question here for all of you is that there's been a lot of talk in the music and creative industry around diversifying their workforces. You know, there's been many different talks of how they're evolving their approach and how they're evolving their outreach. To what extent have any of you actually seen that these kind of approaches have delivered tangible results?
So I'm actually part of PRS Foundation, started something called Power Up, which was specifically to support Black leaders and artists within the music and creative industries. We're now in our 4th year. I think they're about to announce the 5th tranche of that. And that's been a system to try and get sort of leaders in places and supported by others. And because what we found was, while there were a lot of initiatives at lower levels, there were very few at higher and management levels, which is really where you need to be able to affect change. Because otherwise you're kind of literally waiting for people to die out. And there is, you have to kind of find other ways. And I think that was one of the challenges I think that's tried to address. I think the overall landscape is that it's not even necessarily a color thing. or even sometimes a geographic thing, is often a class issue, because most of the structures have been created by private school educated people. They work in a particular way. And because of that, if you haven't come from that background, even if you do get in, how do you navigate and stay in, and how you respond to opportunity, or how you converse in different environments? If you've never played golf or don't ski, there are certain conversations you just don't end up in. And it's how it isn't sometimes just that, oh, let's get these guys a job. For example, when I was in the youth work organization in Barclays, which is great, but it was, if they're going to go to a corporate dinner, do they know which knives and forks to use? And sometimes it's not just about getting in the door, it's about how you safely stay within it. So while there are often initiatives, they can very easily miss out on the thing that makes it sustainable, past the point where I've ticked the box for the Arts Council for this quarter's report.
Check. Thank you. Over to you, Foreda.
Yeah, so advertising was a little bit of a different mark. It's been quite a gate-kept gate-kept in industry for a very, very long time. So when I started, it was exactly what you were saying. You know, you would speak the language, but no one knows what, how to connect with you. But that's something that I had to evolve over time. But now, obviously, with an Omnicom, they have excellent kind of HR protocols and a lot of effort they're putting in to make sure there's a diverse workforce. But I think wider than internally Omnicom and HR, so I don't know the ins and outs. I think that social media has helped to democratize the industry, where people who have been in the industry, who are from different backgrounds, are speaking out about how to actually get in. There are loads of mentors now, formally or informally, and they're sharing what it takes to actually get in, because it's not about just getting in. As you said, it's staying in, who to talk to, how to broach conversations. I'm Muslim, so a lot of the times I would, back in the day in advertising, a lot of the conversations would happen in pubs or, with alcohol, and I was excluded from a lot of those conversations because I didn't know, I wasn't going to these places. But I think now I'm in a position where I can tell someone from who's gotten out of school or uni or just looking into the field how to navigate the industry without having to forego who they are. So I think the power does rely on internally within the HR and stuff, but it also relies on people like me who have seen the changes within the industry.
I've got so much to unpack on this question, but I'm going to kind of keep it brief. One thing I want to put out there from the get-go, as I mentioned in the first session before lunch, I'm from a working class inner city Irish family, but that doesn't mean I don't have my own biases and my own belief systems that I'm trying to change myself. And I've gone through lots of different roles and responsibilities where I'm making a conscious decision to try and understand the challenges intrinsically myself rather than just at a surface level. So that's a journey I'm still going on, and I try and apply it to lots of areas that I work in within the music business. So, for example, I'm delivering a project at the moment for the BBC around the Black Sabbath events that are happening in the city, and it's looking at the kind of the staff bases that I work with, the colleagues in the BBC, the colleagues in the venue, and making sure that everybody that's working on the production side, as well as the bands I'm booking, are as representative of my city or our city as possible. And it is still a really difficult, even with consciousness and awareness, and I still hit my own barriers, but also then there are other obstacles and other challenges elsewhere, and we're trying to slice it through, the lens of non-gender specific. It's irrelevant what kind of socioeconomic class you come from, but at the same time we're trying to make social mobility absolutely built into the whole event. And And then to kind of wrap it all up into your answer, which is in my work, I'm lucky that I get to work with a whole heap of audiences, publics and agencies and organisations, from police forces, police and crime commissioners, through to NHS trusts, through to activism and campaign groups, through to the more formal corporate world. And the disparity that I see and that we see, particularly in the music world, is still huge. But then I think back to, I had a quick chat on camera about what lessons or what would I encourage the music industry or people within the community to do, and it's listening to some of the elders. The elders have been through years of experience. They have probably experienced what you've experienced as a young buck or a young gun, maybe threefold, maybe worse. And so I try and put relativity into the picture here. There are schemes like PRS Foundation's Key Change, PRS Foundation's Black Music Creators, Women Make Music, some of the other music organisations that fall under the UK Music banner are doing what they can in terms of not just EDI strategies, but actually the delivery of them. Because it's all well and good having a policy, but what does it look like? What does it look like now, in 6 months, in 18 months? Are you really going to have that 50-50 gender split? Are you really going to have people in senior leadership positions? So I think the answer is yes and no. There are some real steps and progress being made. And I think the more that we talk about things like cultural appropriation, true representation, all the people that are working behind the scenes, as well as who's on your roster, who's your best-selling artist, the more we will see some seismic changes. And I hope it doesn't get to a point where we need a crisis moment to revisit EDI and make drastic change. We're heading in the right direction, but not quick enough.
Great answers, everyone. And that leads me on to my next kind of question. You kind of touched on it a little bit there towards the end of your answer, and that is, what are the most successful and supportive schemes that you've all encountered in terms of helping access and then building people up towards these higher levels?
So as I said, I felt that PRS Foundation is and the Power Up program, I think, has been excellent. What are the other ones? And as I said, the challenge there, the challenge that then put on the people who were in it was, are you going to go for different types of jobs? Which I then took. So just using myself within that as an example was, I went from very music industry based to working in music education, because we were doing music education projects through industry with no money. And then there was all this seemingly this money in music hubs that didn't talk to industry. So there were very few people in there that seemed to have an understanding of both. So I thought, okay, I'll take this opportunity with Sound Connections. But then the challenge was, it was an entirely different way of communicating. And they even mean slightly different things when they use the term music education. Because music education is often instrumental learning, not being taught about music, which took me ages to kind of really get my head around. And I think that, as I say, that was one of the challenges. So I've then tried to create programs that help that transition. So the other one, turning MOBO Unsung from being kind of an X factor into more artist accelerator program. So we could see that the issues were, for example, with black music, we don't tend to do shows that Live Nation support on a lower level, which means that regardless of how good you're doing on your live performances, you never end up doing a festival, because none of the bookers who book the festivals come to the shows that you're doing. So unless we get you on The Great Escape, which most black artists don't know exist, or we get you onto something else, like, so we've now, this year, we've been able to do a showcase at Great Escape, a showcase at South by Southwest London, and we've got like 4 showcases at Glastonbury, because
we know that when they go to do, and even with like, as great as Glastonbury sounds, for example, we'll probably be performing in front of about 14 people who are just sort of crawling out of bed because it's at 12 o'clock in the afternoon. However, when they go for their funding applications or applying for other festivals next year, if it says on your CV or on your biog that I've played Glastonbury, I've played South by Southwest, you are much more likely to be able to get the interest and support of a CAA, UTA, Live Nation when you're trying to go. And it's opening those kind of access doors. As I said, it's the bits that people don't really talk about. That if you can be working in a part of the industry that if it doesn't connect with other bits and pieces, you just end up going around in circles. Like, how do you get on radio, for example? Well, BBC Introducing is there, but you've kind of got other people at BBC Introducing. And if you live in London, for example, there is one BBC Introducing show that covers 9 million people. So it's actually quite difficult to get anything on Jess's show. And it's like knowing things like that. So now we sort of say, if you've got any aunts or cousins that live in Croydon and can say they're in Surrey, then you're more likely to get on Surrey BBC Introducing than you would on Jess's show. But as I say, it's those kind of things that if you don't know, even when you are going into some of these programs, it needs that understanding to kind of be put behind it. So I don't know if I've mentioned many others that I'm not involved in, but those are the ones that I know what we're trying to do.
Thank you.
So advertising, obviously, you're probably thinking, how does that connect with what we're talking about, which is music? But I think it's a lot to do with transferable skills. So a lot of the things that you learn in terms of networking or talking to brands, talking to clients, are all things that you can pick up on within the industry, data programs, which can elevate your skills even further. Within Omnicom, they've got a great young talent program, but outside of it, I think, again, it goes back to how much people who have been in the industry are actually paying it forward to the younger industry. So things like Forward Culture, which is a South Asian mentoring network where they bring young South Asian women into the creative industry, where other people from the older generation kind of mentor young people. The Other Box is another one who have like a mentoring scheme. We Are POC, which is headed by Kevin Morosky. So I think like the knowledge is there, the onus is on the individual to find out, but then also, the community needs to elevate and help to drive that even further, and to really talk to them about how to navigate these spaces, as you were saying as well. So there are a lot of amazing work happening. It's just, they are very grassroots, but I think a lot of the times it is on the individual to go and find out, but powered through these new initiatives.
In answering this question, I was reminded of something that Olivia Dam mentioned in the very first presentation, which was this notion that the young people that have been through COVID or are just generally way more hyper aware of the bigger geopolitical issues that are affecting us all, but they're a lot more hypersensitive to it now. I think also in a sense of when we're talking about equality, diversity, inclusivity, representation, equity, all of those things, social mobility, that young people are probably way more forward in calling out injustice or imbalance than ever before. I keep playing the age card today, but the older I get, the more I realise it's generationally it does get slightly easier each few years. Yeah. In terms of, I look at the South Bank as doing some good work in this area. Not necessarily about their policies, but in terms of what they project for their curators, for their the artists across disciplines, not just music, who are programming for them. They've had Little Sims doing Meltdown this year or last year, I can't remember. They had Grace Jones. They've also a project that I worked on with the South Bank and Apple was around photography, videography, essentially content production, but of an artistic nature rather than a marketing nature, which elevates photographers, videographers from global majority. And I think that's it's not something that a major arts centre has to do necessarily. So I look at the South Bank, and I also look at B Music, who run Symphony Hall and Town Hall. And I'm not just saying that because I used to work for them, but they are moving into the, fast forward into the 21st century, where it doesn't matter who your CEO is, as long as they're doing the job. They don't have to be from, that particular clique or set that has led the arts or music in the city for some 25, 50 years. So I think an arts centres or major MPOs usually have the funding, the capacity, the infrastructure, the staff pool, the workforce to do it. I think it's the SMEs and the smaller organisations that are probably a fleet of foot in terms of agility and be able to respond to societal changes, but maybe don't have the financial capacity. And those poor guys are overworked and struggling to even find time to make the changes that they need. So I think it's incumbent on some of the big NPOs to set the NPO stands for National Portfolio Organisation, by the way. So that's usually an organisation that receives repeat funding from a funder like the Arts Council, with the basis being that they are delivering a significant amount of output activity. Channel 4 are fairly progressive in terms of production, programming. They're involved in a lot of research projects. So one of my roles in the past was working for the Lenny Henry Centre for Media Diversity, and I was lucky to see a lot of data regarding the media and creative industries, and painting a really, possibly a worse picture than we may realise in terms of the diversity in media and creative industries. But there are some broadcasters, there are some media outlets that are leading the way as well. So I'd look at Channel 4 as a good example.
Thank you for that answer, everyone. And touching on the area of grassroots and the kind of on-the-ground organisations, there was a time where working at your local record shop or working within a local content creation agency could be that step on the ladder up towards, the wider industry, the bigger organisations. How can smaller and local businesses help support that ladder of progress from people starting at grassroots up to the more national and multinational organisations?
I actually think we've got a couple. There's a couple of specific positions that I think that if you know them or can learn them as a young person can put you instead for the entire creative industries. I think if you've done any level of events management, if you've run a social media channel, if you can edit a video and record a piece of production, and if you've got those 4 skills, that is the entry point to the industry. And sometimes it's actually just telling young people that actually many of the things that they're doing on TikTok is the industry, but they don't know that because it needs to be weaponized, for want of a better phrase. So often I get a lot of young people who come up and be like, oh, what can I do to get in the industry and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, first thing I would say to you is find someone on Instagram that's got between 7,000 to 15,000 followers, hit them up in the DMs and say, how can I help? Because I can guarantee you, they probably haven't got management at that stage. They are drowning in their emails and they cannot keep up with the amount of content that they need to create. So if you can help with those things, you are in the music industry. And I also often talk about the fact that the music industry is a little bit like the magic circle. It works because it works if we don't tell everybody the trick, right? As soon as you know what the trick is, it stops being magic. And therefore, some of the gatekeeping is because not everybody should see the trick. But as soon as you get to this place, as I'm actually, one of my team members is shadowing me while I do the MOBO Unsung stuff. And they were kind of at the beginning like, can you just give me a plan as to how this is going to work? And I was like, no. And they were like, what do you mean? Normally this comes with this. And I was like, because it isn't as static as it would be on a college course, for example. So I kind of need you to come along and watch what we do. Why are we going to this place? Why are we speaking to these people? Why have I responded to this email in this way? And then, so we're now about 3 months into it, and we're sitting at the side of the stage in the Great Escape last week, and she was like, I get it. I'm in the music industry now. I'm starting to see the same people who are doing jobs in various different places. I can now see behind the curtain. And when everybody else is kind of trying to do the show, I now know how the bits work. It's like, you can see the matrix now. This was the point. And sometimes it's getting over that hump, because actually, and again, this goes back to what I was saying about the challenge of private school and middle classes, because these are many of the things you may have seen at home or family members do. If you haven't come from that background, if you don't have an uncle who runs something or understand the concept of what an invoice is, for example, those things that are kind of the underpinnings of how we operate and how we connect with one another get missed, and you don't realize that that's important. And as I say, that kind of can be sometimes a challenge. I want to just ask me the question again, because I think I've gone on a little bit of a tangent, and I'm intending to come back to it. So just was the last bit of the question.
It was how an organisation can then support people on the ladder upwards.
Yeah. So I say all of that in just from the point of view of it also takes like you were saying about it, there is a responsibility on the individual to find things. And I think that sometimes there is a challenge within that of, do you know the right thing to Google? And how do you find out what the right thing to Google is? And my encouragement for younger people is to get started. Do something. We're much more likely to support you if you can come to me and go, I took this band from having 300 followers to 2,000. Right? I don't necessarily need you to be able to tell me that you've done a campaign where you now have 14 million followers on TikTok and you've done, do you know what I mean? And you've managed, that's further on down the line. I just want you to have the concept. And I think once you have those kind of skills, there are so many organizations who need social media from young people because they just don't understand how it works and what a TikTok campaign is and those sorts of things. So I think those beginning elements, if young people knew that what they were doing was actually putting them into the industry, I think that would help them.
Great. I think that's some great advice there. Some brilliant tips. I've written a few of those down.
So I have a two-pronged answer. One is a personal one, and then one is as the industry from advertising. My first one, the personal one, is, I don't know if I can say it, but reverse nepotism. Like, if we're all complaining about how people who know people from certain backgrounds get jobs easily, but as people who are in the industry now, we work. So I'm not going to lie, I've hired some people from my family within Omnicom, but not because of because of, they're my family or friends, whatever. It's more like I have been given the privileged position to be able to have that to give to someone or to put them in the right direction, put them in touch with the right person. So I think there is a level of responsibility, again, that we have within the industry to, again, pay it forward. I'm saying the same answer again and again, but whatever. And then within the industry itself, so within my team, within Omnicom, so as I said, we work with brands to really make authentic and beautiful campaigns, not just like a frilly kind of nice to have tick box exercise. It's going from the data right to the end product, and that through line is speaking to the right people, connecting with the right audiences, all the way down to casting, for example. And so the ways that we do it within our team is, it's really not about how big you are or on social media, for example. Like, we often work with partners or platforms that are grassroots. So Amalia, which is a Muslim women's platform, or Black Ballad, which is another platform for Black women. we often connect with them to create content for a bespoke campaign for a brand like Sainsbury's, for example. And it works really well. And we could go to the likes of Vox Media or Channel 4 or ITV, for example. But what they don't have is the insight and the cultural connection and also just the talent, to be honest. So I think that's the way we're helping the young people to get onto the ladder, is by actually focusing on the smaller partners that we could work with, and recognizing that they exist there. And I think that's the responsibility that we have within Omnicom.
That's a really good point, is that there are so many constituent component parts. If you look at the creative industries and how many freelancers and consultants and sole traders and small SMEs, you talked about venues and maybe businesses and brands at a certain point. I would like to assume that in a city in the UK, any city that's got a relatively mixed community, and you've built up your business or your brand or your venue or your production company, that you have had to work with multiple different types of professionals from multiple different types of communities. And so you've got to a point where you understand the ecosystem relies on everyone. And so maybe that's a bit idealistic of me. And I know that there are people out there that are blockers and, or just not entertaining the idea of paying it forward, which is a really great phrase that I try and use a lot in practice. I think look, ultimately this drills down to humanism, I think, is if you know somebody is on their way up and they're emerging as an artist or they're emerging as a creative industries professional and they're struggling to get a door open, or they're struggling to work something out, like what an invoice is, that's like, take it as such a given that people know what it is, how to navigate a work lunch, how to avoid going for, the boozy Friday afternoon thing. There's so much to get your head around, and all it takes really is a kind word, or a pointer, or a bit of advice. And I think maybe we've lost that a little bit. Let's be honest, guys, we've been through a pretty tough couple of years, as humans in the UK anyway. Geopolitically, shit's bad. So, not all bad, but we've got a lot that we are dealing with. But the thing that connects a lot of us, that golden thread, that connector, that common denominator, is being kind to each other, giving each other a leg up. So I think also when you become an employer and you become a business owner, or you become influential, or you have a platform of sorts, it is incumbent on you. It's kind of part of the ethics of life, the unwritten law of life, that you have to reach out to the person that's below you and help them up. Now, yeah, that is idealistic, I know. But I think if it can't happen in music if it can't happen in the creative industries, certainly the independent creative industries, because we know when it gets to a certain corporate level, all bets are off and it's every person for themselves. So yeah, I would encourage everybody to try and pay it forward. Even if you're at the kind of the start of your career, there's probably still someone who's a couple of years younger than you that needs a bit of encouragement. I would also suggest there might be some issues around people who are inexperienced not wanting to embarrass themselves or look like they don't know by asking a question, for fear that it might be too basic or too naive. Something that I try and say to a lot of the young people that I work with is everyone who's older than you started in your position. Yeah. Okay? Apart from those absolute Nepo babies that, are basically they're born with a CV and a silver CV in their mouth. But the notion of you can be really senior in the music business, and someone comes up to you and asks you a question that might seem a basic one. What's a contract? What's a gig? At some point, somewhere down the road, that senior music exec had to find out the answer to that question. If you're a dick and you choose not to answer that question, then you don't deserve to be in the game. But so I just think like breaking down the barriers between knowledge sharing, and it doesn't matter how busy you are, how much wedge you've got in your bank account, who you're working with, always make the time to answer questions.
One more thing to add. I think there's like real power in your presence. So if you are, as you were saying, take the first step. If you're proactive enough, the presence of you being in the room helps to open up conversations that they've never kind of even thought about before, or something that they've taken for granted, but haven't really seen the experience through another lens. That experience and knowledge in itself is so beneficial for a company to move forward. As someone who works in an agency, like having, before it wasn't like that. It was like, 10 to 1 kind of people from a certain background and me. But I could see how me probing certain questions, why are we doing this in this way? How come we're not connecting with these communities who, over-index in this behavior, for example? If they didn't consider that, if they didn't hear that, they would have considered that for a campaign. So I think the proactiveness would lead to you being in rooms where you can really shape the narrative of what's going on, whether it is in the music industry or other industries too.
I was just going to say on the end of that, one thing first as well, a great initiative to look out for is Small Green Shoots. They're doing some absolutely amazing work. And just on the point that you were making about effectively not being a prick, essentially, I remember my band were quite young and we were doing a show and there was this group that were on stage and they did really well and were quite well known. And we're backstage afterwards, I probably was about 19, and I went up to the lead singer and was like, hey, look, when you would love to find out how you do this. And his response was, it's taken me ages to work out how you do this. You're going to have to do it yourself. And I thought, that was a really pricky thing.
Needs to be bagged out.
And it was like, but within that, it was always a case of, if I ever get to a point where I'm in that situation, I will never do that again. And I thankfully have seen in the industry, there's a lot more people who have had those kind of experiences and have made the decision that they won't do that. However, a lot of the people above them had those experiences and thought that that was the way you did it. And that was the way that you encouraged people to come forward.
It's almost like the magic circle reference that you used earlier. It's like, actually, we do need to break that a little bit, because what comes with magic circle of keeping it close, the protectionist, is all manner of nasty stuff, all manner of cover-ups, all manner of pooling resources or taking resources, all manner of unfairness. And we see that in the media, we see that in other industries, and it's a tough nut to crack in terms of like when you get a tin opener and you open that lid up. There are a lot of people blocking that. There are a lot of institutional biases and cultures within record labels and within major promoters that are stopping that, but that we move. That ain't going to stop us from change.
Sorry, I'll shut up. I promise. But the last thing I want to add is that with the democratization of the industries, especially within the creative industry, it means that you don't. I know you're saying to break the magic. I don't even know that. I'm gonna
circle.
Yeah, man. Right. Fine. Okay, great. I'm trying to know what it is, but I don't. But I think that with the democratization of the creative industries, people becoming their own businesses, sole traders and stuff like that, you can actually get paid for your experience. So rather than banging on the doors trying to get in the quote unquote industry, like you said, these are people who are creating their own kind of entities online. They are being paid for their kind of knowledge and experience. So I don't know if you guys know about Candice Brathwaite. She's an influencer online, a Black British woman who I absolutely love. She's kind of paved the way for herself, where she only works with brands who speak to her and her experience, and kind of only partners with people that that has a great value on her and also the community. So I think we put too much emphasis on breaking down the walls of the actual industry itself. But there's always another way which you can create yourself, because sometimes it's too hard to break into something that's archaic. Kind of have to build, we have to build it ourselves sometimes.
Some really, really interesting insights and answers there. That was great. Checking on time, Dan, we're close.
Two more hours.
Perfect. Well, to summarise, I've created a poem while we're sitting here that's going to lift from things that have been said. It looks a bit funny in the moment, so you might have to excuse a word or two, but we're going to give it a go. The large fork or the small spoon, a career-defining choice. And the experience of other people could be the key to strengthening your voice. To being noticed, it could be that you find someone from 7 to 15,000 followers. Sending a message and offering help could be the twist to your story, like Oliver's. Learn how and why can bring that Morpheus to your matrix. It's what you know, then who you know. The key to moving in basics. Get started, do something. Keys to your path to success. How much you use your mind and your resources. The true keys to what's next.
Boy.
Thank you, everyone. That was really great. And next over to Shanice to take us through.